We're going to give people just a minute or so here, but please, if you get a chance, can you scan the QR code at the bottom of the screen? And that way you can follow us on LinkedIn. We share a lot of great content and future panel discussions as well. So we'll be on in just a minute here. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining our panel discussion today. My name is Paul Schrantz, Director of Business Development and Alliances for Vendor-Centric, and I'm thrilled to host this today. Just a few logistics before I turn it over to our CEO and founder, Tom Rogers, the moderator for today's panel. We'll be recording the session, so we'll make sure to get it out to you in the next couple of days via email. And also, we'll be monitoring the QA room throughout, so please feel free to add as many questions as you have, and we'll make sure to get to as many as we can with the panelists. So thank you so much for attending, and I'm sure you're going to have a great discussion. So I'm going to turn it over to Tom. Here you go.
All right, thank you, Paul, and welcome everyone to our March webinar. Glad to have you. We're going to be discussing today the biggest tech trends that are impacting vendor management in 2024 and beyond. And it's really a timely topic. I'd say probably 5 years ago, if you were doing a search for vendor management software on a platform like Capterra, you get around 60 to 70 software options that might come back. I actually did that as we were researching vendor management software. Today, if you went on that same platform, you'd find over 400 different options, and it's growing. So vendor management tech is really exploding. As a company that specializes in vendor management ourselves, it's really good to see, because I think it's a sign and a signal that vendor management continues to go mainstream. It's being adopted a lot more by organizations as a core business function. So tech is a big enabler. And on today's panel, we have the full life cycle of vendor management covered, from contract management solutions to procure-to-pay solutions to third-party risk solutions. So we've got everything around vendor management tech that we'll be covering today. So let me go ahead and jump right into introducing the panelists so we can get the conversation started. And Nick and Alastair, if you want to put your screens on, I'll get you guys introduced. Awesome. There we are. Good to see you. So first up, let me introduce Alastair Parr. Alastair is SVP of Global Products and Delivery at Prevalent, which is a leading provider of third-party risk management software. Alastair leads Prevalent's overall product strategy and innovation, ensuring the company's portfolio of products remain fresh and responsive to changing technology needs and market trends. Alastair, good to see you. Welcome to the webinar.
Thank you for having me. Look forward to it.
Awesome. Next up is Nick Poisson. Nick is a manager of solutions consulting at Procurify, which is a leading provider of procure-to-pay software. Nick is a senior member of Procurify's solutions team, ensuring customers are leveraging the platform to optimize their procurement and purchasing practices. Welcome, Nick.
Thanks, Tom.
And rounding things out is Simon Jones. Simon is Senior Director of Product Marketing at Agiloft, a leading provider of contract lifecycle management software. I told you we had all aspects of vendor management tech covered today. Simon's a tech veteran with more than 25 years experience in cloud software and cutting-edge technologies, who also has a passion for explaining complicated things in simple ways. Simon, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the webinar. Sorry, I'm confusing my podcast with the webinars. Simon, I think you're on mute.
And I can't believe I'm still doing that. It's 2024. Good Lord.
That's all right. It's early on the West Coast, so you get that coffee going. Well, cool. So listen, there's a lot happening in tech right now, but I thought where we would start is probably an area of tech that is maybe the hottest topic and the one that is probably on just about everybody's minds, and that's AI and machine learning. So I thought we'd start there as we start to dig into what's happening in tech. And really to start off, I thought we'd talk about how you all are seeing AI and machine learning being integrated into vendor management applications, whether it be procurement related, contract, third-party risk. Where are you seeing the energy right now around AI? And maybe you could even talk a little bit about what your companies are doing and how you're starting to look at AI in your own platforms to give folks a little bit of perspective. And Al, I thought we'd start with you for this topic.
Thank you. Yeah, it's certainly an interesting topic. And I think we're all somewhat blessed when it comes to the very nature of what we're dealing with third-party risk landscapes, which is you have to deal with a huge volume of data and you have to analyze it in a relatively consistent way. Now, that's perfect opportunity for some of the AI capabilities that are starting to emerge. As much as a lot of the focus nowadays tends to be on things like generative AI, the reality is machine learning, AI on a whole, is very good at sorting the volume data and being able to derive some meaningful insights out of it. So when you look at what we see in the space, right now there's a degree of trepidation surrounding AI, and naturally so, because it's not going to replace analysts and the work that they're doing, but it is a supplementary tool to help reinforce and improve the quality of some of the things that they're doing analytically. And what we're really seeing in the space, particularly when it deals with the risk management component, is that they're looking at the vast landscapes that people have, those risk landscapes, those large vendor inventories, and trying to really derive where there is commonality and dissent across the data set. So are there trends, and are there any anomalies that might be meaningful? So when we're looking at the analytics space of it, it's very, very interesting because the AI piece is able to identify that meaningfully and pretty quickly, and then have that validated by the analysts. It makes their process worlds easier and far simpler. Now that's more on the receptive point, the analysts doing the review of the results. The other avenue where we're seeing a lot of focus, and certainly from Prevalent's perspective as well, is part of the response process. It's an age-old problem where vendors have to complete the same but very, very similar, but slightly different assessments. It's a pain. Everybody has to experience it in some shape or form. And despite attempts to try and standardize on standards and frameworks such as the SIG or NIST frameworks or ISO, it's nonetheless still a bit of a Wild West.
Sure.
So AI has been particularly useful in consolidating that and being able to analyze materials and prompt recommendations, suggestions for assessments. So for me personally, that avenue, making life easier for vendors and making life easier for the analysts looking at the data, has been a real meaningful step forward in the space.
So on the third-party risk side, is you're really looking at what's happening there. A lot of it is there's workflow automation, part of it through the analysis, the ability to take in the data and do a lot of the analysis that maybe a human might do. But then it's also starting, what I'm hearing you say, is actually looking at the risk data itself and trying to bubble up what the actual risks are, where the trends you're seeing, what are some maybe remediations that you could do based on the risk that you're seeing. So allowance of the platform is starting to take that information and automate that, give you actionable insights back. And then I think what I'm hearing you say, so that frees up time, that would free up time for the analyst to actually look at the data and make decisions versus doing all the chasing and all that other stuff. Is that right?
Absolutely. And if I was going to distill it down to the most operative words, I would say that it's going to enable people to do things quicker and better because it's the analytical skills are non-comparable to a human, and the ability to be able to take all that disparate information and normalize it is really, really powerful.
Right. Okay, that's interesting. Nick, Simon, what are you all seeing?
I'll go next because I think I've got a really similar philosophy to Alastair, where we're not trying to replace analysts or even truly automate decision making, but giving people kind of nice soft guardrails and making and using AI and machine learning to make that piece of it a little bit easier. Whether that's analyzing vendor data, we've had real-time vendor scorecards for a long time. So yeah, and especially in our world, we work with a lot of finance people who we all know like to have their hands in, right? And so we don't want to fully remove them from the picture, but we want to automate those menial tasks. And then the other piece that we're getting big into, and I suspect I'm going to be pumping Simon's tires a fair bit this webinar because contracts are a big focus for us because that's what we're hearing in the procurement landscape. And so we're really looking at that in two ways. The first is a phrase I think you're going to hear a lot in the next couple of years, which is four-way matches, where of course finance people have an automated three-way match of you've got your PO, you've got your item receipt, and you've got your invoice. But now how do those three interact with a contract? And so that is, I think, really the next frontier in terms of automating the finance world. And then the other piece around that is using OCR and machine learning to analyze those contracts. I think contracts are not a dirty word, but they scare people, right? In the finance world because there's so much work to work with. And so this is actually on our very near-term roadmap is the ability to scan a contract, extract the relevant data that a purchasing person or a finance person needs in order to interact with that contract. And then, of course, to be proactive in terms of warning them to renegotiate, warning if they're going to go over. And so, again, it's really about not replacing what a finance or an analyst can do, but freeing up their time with getting away from that menial, not value-added work.
That's really interesting on the four-way match. I was an auditor the first part of my life, so three-way matches were critical. We used to check to make sure clients were doing all of that. But to your point, actually looking at where the spend is hitting against the contract to manage that, I mean, that's been something folks have been trying to do for a while. So it's interesting. I'll be clear. Before I go to Simon real quick, I just want to do a quick follow-up. What about spend analytics? So you're on the procure to pay side. If I'm doing my requisitions right, if it's going through approval, generating a PO, all my spend data should be flowing through my procure to pay platform. What about AI and spend analytics? What are you seeing there?
Yeah, and for us, kind of counterintuitively to the name Procurify would suggest, we actually work with a lot of organizations that don't have a full-on procurement team. And this has been a lot of the value we provide is getting a tool instead of hiring a person. And so for people like that, they've had a lot of data for a long time, but it's great to have data. And it's only good to have data, sorry, unless you know what to do with it, right? And so I think that's where we're looking at things is using AI as almost like a spend coach of what should you be looking at? What are the metrics that you should be tracking? How do you even start to set up goalposts? And then how do you move them? And so yeah, sort of like that, almost like an internal spend coach is where we're thinking about using AI going forward for sure. Yeah, and this is actually for the first time in our company, we've hired a full-on data analytics team, and so we're really excited to build that piece of the app out more and more for sure.
Yeah, so you guys are investing in a team focusing around leveraging AI. Alastair, I know you guys are doing that as well. And if you think about the power of the analytics side and AI, I mean, start to think about vendor rationalization. You can start to track, pricing differences between different vendors that may be selling the same types of commodities. I mean, there's so much potential around spend management, I think, with AI. But we're still on the front end of getting all this figured out, I would imagine, right? Simon, how about on the contract management side? What's happening over there? And you're on mute.
How am I doing this twice in one day? Absolutely, I was slurping away at my whatever this is, my root beer, and I didn't want you all to have to listen to it. Yeah, there's a huge amount going on with AI in the contract space right now, and I think Al, you captured the essence of the challenge, right? Which is that machine learning and AI is fantastically good at identifying trends and fantastically bad at identifying specifics, right? So I take 10,000 contracts, I can say, what's my risk level? And it'll be shockingly accurate. And if I say which is the one that's going to be the problem, it's going to be wrong, right? So it's finding that balance where you can use the trend effectively and you can use that sort of broad modeling. So a lot of what we're seeing in the the contract management space is you're exactly right, Nick. Everything is about data right now. It's all about making sure that the data that lives inside of the contracts is available to be used, not just by finance, but also by by procurement, by sales for that matter, by manufacturing. So we understand the kind of the commitments we've made, the obligations we've agreed to, the expectations we should have, and getting that lifted up, and then asking ourselves, what can we do with AI where that sort of challenge on the specific doesn't matter? So, for instance, think about generative AI. You probably don't want generative AI to write your contract for you just yet. I don't think it's smart enough yet, and I don't think it has access to enough of your own esoterica to do it yet. But you know what it's really, really good at? Identifying all of the contracts that need to either be accepted or either renewed or cancelled this quarter. And then once you get the set that need to get cancelled, it's really good at writing the letter for you in an appropriate way that copies your voice and does it the right way. And it's more than kind of a mail merge, because it needs to make sure it picks out all of the particular agreements and specifies things. Terrific at doing that sort of thing. So it's finding that midway space where its ability to do things in sort of at the high level is easily leveraged, and not trying to imagine that it's going to solve an individual problem where sort of it's basically an odds machine, right? It's a statistics machine. It's making sure you don't expect it to get the 1 out of 10,000, but to get the trend for the 10,000 you can use.
Yeah, and it can do a lot of that. I don't know if grunt work is the right word, but it can do a lot of that teeing up for you to then be able to put the fine touches on, right? So it might get you 70% of the way there in the letter that you're talking about, Simon, but you've got to put on. I think that's a little bit of where folks need to be starting to get their heads around, which is no matter what, it's not going to be, you still need, at least now, until Elon Musk implants chips in all of our heads and we're all kind of, talking through the computer. But you still need humans to be able to kind of look at it with the context of the company and what the risks are for the business they're in, all that stuff. You still need humans to be able to do that stuff. But the AI part's going to be pretty powerful. So let me ask you also, so based on what you're talking about and the capabilities, how are platforms today? So are these things already integrated in, and these are things that folks can be doing right now? Are they on the front end of starting to get some of this going? And you can be thinking about your own platforms and what you're doing. Where are we on the roadmap with this thing based on what you were talking about?
Should I jump in this time? Yeah, well,
yeah, perfect.
I'm not on mute, so I might as well. It's almost like we are at the point where Henry Ford was making Model Ts, right? We've worked out how to make an internal combustion engine. We've worked out how to plug it into a thing with wheels and a steering wheel, and we can make a car that works, right? So I think the AI that is available is getting folded into software left, right, and center. Everybody's all over it. We're making it do all the things that it can do. There's a kind of, which if that's here, and then there's the people like me who market it, and we're selling somewhere up here quite often, right? I think we're doing everything that it possibly can, but we're now waiting for that next round, right? So today I could work with an Agiloft customer and say, okay, so you have an ESG commitment. You want to make sure that your set of partners and vendors are not presenting unreasonable risk in some area or other. And I can run AI and I can identify stuff and go, yeah, generally speaking, we're at a good spot. We have a safe harbor. There may be a couple hiding away in there that if you looked at sideways are bad, but we have safe harbor right now. The next round will be our ability to say, seriously, take all of my stuff, securely give it to a large language model, which can actually read all of that stuff and become really, really smart on that. The challenge we have today is we're not quite ready to hand over our contracts to somebody else's servers, which seems fair, but you also can't put 10,000 contracts into a prompt. So there's a break. We're at level one, man. Another 2 or 3 generations of this, and maybe Elon Musk will be putting chips in our heads, and we'll all be becoming mentats from Dune. I don't know.
I don't know either. Nick, Alastair, where do you think we are on this? Same as
I-
Simon?
Yeah, I'd certainly very much agree. So I think there's been lots of first adopters in that perspective. When you look at things like the Gartner hype cycle, that sort of illustrates it to some extent as well, which is, if I use product terms, people have introduced a minimum viable product in this case. They thought, well, what are the ways that we can leverage the technology's capabilities today in a meaningful way? And they've done the first steps towards that. I absolutely agree. It's got a long way to go. The initial value that we're tending to see on focus from our focus is providing things like a risk advisor to advise on how to manage risk, to tap into the broader knowledge sets that generative AI can provide and large language models. And then the evolution of starting to look at the aggregated data. Is there anything meaningful here that we can derive that helps us do our jobs better?
Yeah.
Over time, I totally agree, as people become more comfortable with the concept of sending sensitive data rather than just anonymized data out externally to somebody else's servers and data centers, we might see more start to emerge. But I would say most organizations are starting to look at how can they leverage their data in a meaningful way and be able to do so in a secure fashion. And I think AI is really going to get a sizable uptick over the next 18, 24 months into something that is becoming less of a nice assistant to have into something that's adding real demonstrable value beyond a minimum viable product.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot of money coming into the space as well. So there's a lot of investment happening in this. Nick, same thing on your end?
Yeah, and the other thing that we're seeing is there's still a bit of a trust gap. And so I know we're going to talk a little bit more about like adoption and usability in a bit, but I think like, especially when in my world where we're all about making it easy for the end users, the last thing you want, if you just need to buy something to get your job done, the last thing you can have is your users don't trust the app that they're putting it into, or they don't trust it's going to get done, or they don't trust it's going to get done right. And so there's still a bit of that gap there that I think, you know, we've in our world anyways, we've got to tread a little lightly and keep things behind the scenes a bit, as the broader public gets more and more comfortable that this is just a tool. It's not something to be scared of.
I think that's a great point, because it's also a matter of, you know, and this is a big issue with our clients that are doing risk assessments on their vendors, which is, if I have data going into your systems, what are you doing with it? And think if I'm in healthcare and I have PHI and things like that are happening. So, you know, there's opportunity here, but there's also kind of standards and structure and all that stuff that needs to be figured out as we're going through it. So let me just remind folks, I'm going to segue into the next topic, but remind folks, if you have questions, drop your questions in the Q&A. We'll be happy to answer them to the extent we've got time. I'll keep an eye on it and try to get to as many as I can. So you talked about, AI, data, we're talking a lot about, you know, obviously that requires good data to be in your system, but also requires integration and interoperability between systems, because I've got data in my procure to pay software, Nick. I've got data in my contract management software, Simon. I have data in my third-party risk platforms, Al. So, you know, if you're really, Nick, you know, maybe it'd start with you. So if you're I've got contract data over with Agiloft and I have my spend data with Procurify, what's happening on the integration standpoint? Because I have to get that data together some way and I need it to be working across systems. Or are we going to see everybody start to morph together and to be able to bring everything into one platform? That's a question we get a lot. Right now, I think it's more best of breed with some capabilities that cross over into each other. But I'll be curious what you're looking at in terms of what's happening with integration and interoperability between systems, because data is going to be so critical. And then last thing real quick, and then you also have third-party risk intelligence data. You have supplier diversity. You have software companies that are specifically doing stuff around data, right? Diversity, ESG, risk intelligence. So now you've got another set of data. How has all that stuff come together? What's going to be happening with that?
Yeah, so I think we're seeing we're seeing this. This is another area that's growing a ton, and I think it starts with just better and easier APIs from, frankly, from everybody involved. That for a long time, when a client would come to us, we'd say your ERP has to be the backbone. Everything goes in and out of the ERP. But now that so many different tools have good APIs, we can start to think, how do these things talk directly to one another? And maybe we can skip the ERP for a lot of stuff, which is really nice. Um, and then along with the better APIs come a lot of really brilliant third-party tools like Boomi, like Tray.io. Like we've got partnerships with a few of them like Launchpad, where there's sort of these middle layers that lets a bunch of tools connect to each other. In a lot of cases, it's almost a self-serve type thing that you can really, really easily build your own connections to your apps. And then finally, just with, these things becoming easier and cheaper to work with, this might be a little bit inside baseball, but like a company like ours with only a couple hundred people, we can never afford to have like a 30-person team just building custom integrations for people. But as these things have gotten easier, now about a year ago, we brought on a team that we've got 3 people that just pump away custom integrations all day. And it's been a brilliant thing that we can now offer customers a lot more choice, and we don't have to say, go figure it out yourself. This is something that you're sort of people in the startup world or sort of mid-range companies can offer a lot more customization than they used to in the past, because the not just your own tool is easy to build stuff for, but the partner tool that your customer wants to use is easier to work with than it used to be. So it's really a whole new world. It's really opened up a lot for customers.
So real quick follow-up on that. So on the procure to pay side, you've got 3 folks that are doing that. What are you integrating into? So what are the give me your top 2 or 3 platforms that you're talking back and forth between?
For us, it's still ERPs are still going to be number one, but we're
Okay.
seeing more and more with inventory systems. People want to know what they've got on hand, not just for like resale, but even just things like how many MacBooks do we have, just like asset tracking, that sort of thing. And then the other is like project management type tools that people are working in one place and they need to buy for a project. And so we're seeing people want to push and pull data to allow their team to work where they want to work and not have to jump between systems. So that's another
Interesting.
great opportunity.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Awesome. Thanks for that. Simon, how about on the contract management side?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen an explosion in the need for data, and that means the need for integration. So much like what Nick said, we see the kind of the intervention of the iPaaS. I love that phrase, iPaaS, integration platform as a service. There you go. I even said it out loud. We've actually built one into our system. We partnered with Wakato. I hope I pronounced that right. And it does, as you said, Nick, it lets people who have sort of basic intelligence drag and drop and create recipes and create connections. I think that the issue though is like, why do you integrate? We always have to remember that as technologists, we tend to think about how, and we have to come back and ask ourselves kind of why, right? And the concept is that if everybody's aware of the same thing at the same time, then we're going to be more efficient, we're going to be more effective. Um, and so, um, you know, I personally, when I think about APIs, my sort of my stomach drops. I hate thinking about APIs because every time you move an API, one of the things you always think about is like, what's the source and what's the destination? And I think as we build out these platforms, what's glorious is when they become a set of systems that work seamlessly between each other. I know that sounds crazy, but I'm going to go back to my car metaphor, dang it. Right at the point of sort of the first round of mass production, there was a company that made the engines and a company that made braking systems, a company that made clutches, and you knew, right? If you think back even to the 1970s, where people were getting excited about their muscle cars, you knew which brake pads you had, or you knew which clutch system you had, and now we don't, right? You buy a car and it has a bunch of stuff, right? And that's, I think, the destination to which we're headed with integration is there's a bunch of systems, but they come together and we have a core set of understanding, right? I don't think we're even close to there yet. Don't get me wrong, but this is the point where everything's just sort of flowing along, and then the data outputs are dropping into a place where now you can do the reporting. We've seen threats of this working for what, 20 years now, data warehouses. Now we're at data lakes. I assume it'll be data oceans and data universes at some point. But this idea of a seamlessly interacting set of systems of record that then feed a visualization system, I think that has to be the vision for the future.
Al, how about you?
No, I certainly agree when it comes to the value of things like iPaaS solutions. We're similar in the sense that we leverage Workato in our connector marketplace, and then we have supporting teams that are able to build accelerated deployments from that perspective and integrations. And I agree the reality stems from why are we trying to do these integrations? And I don't think I could add much more in any better way than I think Simon did. So I'll pivot to the other aspect of it, which is they're doing it because they have pure play systems that play a function in the life cycle. And I agree it's about moving data seamlessly between each of those different systems. And the rationale behind it is that we have different teams consuming the data in different ways, and they need the value of understanding where it is in the life cycle and what's happening from procurement to cyber, information security, through to the privacy, legal teams, etc. There is value in sharing progress across these pure play or best of breed technologies. Where we are seeing people start to ask and clamor for a one-stop shop, a comprehensive solution that covers the breadth of the life cycle, usually tends to be a case where they're relatively greenfield. They either don't have the investment to be able to go for purely a pure play best of breed, and they're looking for something that's good enough in that respect, or they've got teams that are otherwise not attached to an existing process, and they're looking for some degree of revision. Now, that doesn't mean to say that if you have the investment, that a one-stop shop isn't aspirational and the right way to go. It's more a case of trying to understand what your business needs are, how sophisticated each of those processes need to be, and therefore what's going to be the best investment of your time and money accordingly. There are certainly some value benefits of having a more seamless piece of having a one-stop shop, as much as there are of having dedicated pure play across that life cycle.
Yeah, that is a great point. A lot of folks that we talk to they're looking for the panacea, which is that kind of one-stop shop. It just isn't. My opinion, my personal opinion, our opinion is there's none of them that are out there, no matter what they tell you. And I think your point around, what's most important to you and what's really driving this, what is critical and what is good enough will generally direct you to where you want to go. And some future state, and Simon's future state, which that sounds like an awesome place to be, where everything's kind of flowing together. That's awesome. In the meantime, it's figuring out where's the critical workflows I have to manage, and can one system get me good enough, or do I really need two best of breed because and then how do I connect them together? And do I need to connect them to your ERP as well? And obviously, data and data governance is critical to all this. And the big challenge is always, where's the source of truth? So where does each piece of data live? Should it be in the contract management system? Should it be in the procurement system? Because you've got to make those decisions as you're trying to connect the dots on all this stuff as well. So there's a lot of challenges to make this work, but I think we've got the integrations are getting better because they have to be to allow for interoperability between the systems. So let me get to, I have one question here from Brian. I think it's related to the topic we're on. So let me get your opinion on this. So Brian says, would like to hear the opinions on the top pros and cons on utilizing a complete end-to-end source-to-pay system versus multiple independent systems using middleware systems and APIs throughout the source to pay life cycle. So I read that as full vendor lifecycle management, sourced all the way through pay, but including contracting, risk, and all the other things you would normally. So we were talking about this a little bit. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
They're brilliant if you've got the, as Alastair was saying, like if you've got the resources and the time to wait to get it implemented, and you can make it work. Like it's awesome. You can have a big end-to-end system any way you want it. But for the majority of clients we're talking to, there's probably a bigger pain at one spot or another that is more pressing, that is a more water's coming out of the boat type of a situation. And so that's usually what we're seeing. But if you've got the money and you've got the time and you've got the resources, we'd all love to drive a Rolls to get on Simon's metaphors. But it's more, do you have the time and can you wait the year for delivery? Yeah.
Any other
certainly
thoughts? Yeah.
Yeah, I fully endorse, I think, what you said there, Nick, as well, and which is something I tend to see, which is if you have the resource to buy a true enterprise end-to-end system, you're typically going to be in a larger organization, which means there's definitely going to be a degree of politics, unfortunately, attached to it. You're going to have to get multiple teams aligned and bought into the concept of one glorious panacea end-to-end, and that's not an easy process. Any significant enterprise end-to-end program that I tend to see, yeah, you're looking at years of meaningful investment before you get everybody aligned, everybody happy, and the return on investment that you initially made. And that can be challenging.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to switch metaphors now that you've shared it. But imagine that you look at your house, you don't say to yourself, you know what, I think I'm going to rebuild this whole bloody thing very often, right? Often you'll look at the house and go, the kitchen's so outdated. They'll fix up the kitchen, and then maybe I'll deal with the bathroom, and you work your way through it. It's back to the thing I said before about technologists tend to see technology. On the whole, if you have an opportunity where someone says, we don't have a problem, we see an opportunity, we should build an end-to-end thing and it's going to make us more awesome. Amen. Go for it. You're going to be mad in 5 years because the cycle continues and we're back to, oh no, you should never get yourself stuck in a walled garden. You should go to composable architecture or whatever we call it next time. But generally speaking, you're exactly right. People normally turn up going, I have a problem. This is causing pain. It's reducing our ability to be effective. Solve this problem for me, and we'll worry about the rest of it later, right? Fix up my kitchen where all the water's dripping underneath the sink and rotting everything. Then we'll talk about a bigger remodel. So yeah, if you can go end to end, I think terrific. Though again, I do believe that you'll regret it later, because the tech cycle spins, right? And we go between loving best of breed and then loving end to end, and then loving best of breed and loving end to end. But it's unlikely that you'll find yourself very often in that situation.
Yeah. So to kind of summarize, so the costs are going to be higher on the con side. The costs are going to be higher. The time to implement is going to be a lot higher. There's also, look, there is, my opinion again, there is no great end-to-end solution. It doesn't exist, no matter what somebody might be telling you. So I think there's going to be a lot of customization that's going to be needed. And I hate customization. It's a horrible word. It gets you into a lot of problems, especially when you try to unbundle. It also doesn't allow you to keep up with best practice and changing technologies and things that a lot of the best of breeds can. So, so the pro would be that you have something that hopefully gets you from point A to point Z. But that's a lot of stakeholders to try to make happy. That's a lot of processes and workflow to try to get into one system. Even the ERPs try to tackle it through modularization, right? So you got your core platform and they're adding modules, but the modules are typically light in terms of what they can do. They're not as robust as they would be if you have a real best of breed system. So I don't know. I think a lot of it is figuring out where your pain points are, focusing on that as your core platform and kind of building around it, which is a little bit of what we've been talking about as well. Cool. So let's move on to, let's look at our time here. Let's move on to a third topic here, which is user experience and adoption and what's happening with technology and enhancing that. Obviously, user experience is a key driver of adoption, how easy a solution is to use, how ubiquitous it is in my day-to-day workflow that I'm already in. What are you all seeing? Maybe Al, I'll start with you. What are you all seeing in terms of new features or design principles that are making platforms more user-friendly and intuitive for end users so we can drive higher levels of adoption and just make it generally easier for people to use?
Yeah, and it's an interesting point, as we start sharing the data that we're all aggregating across the life cycle, across the disparate business units, you have the challenge of moving the technology away from the power users, the people who live and breathe risk, live and breathe contracts, procurement, whatever it may be, and try to translate that and also how you present that information into something meaningful. Unfortunately, not every technology in business has a Simon to be able to translate it into metaphors and and acronyms. Well, not acronyms ideally, but we have that challenge of being able to present the information in a meaningful way to someone who might happen to dip in and out. And I think a lot of organizations had some experience of that when you're trying to translate this data to a board exec level, where you have to condense it, simplify it, and then draw out the salient points and present it. And what we're seeing start to happen in this space as we start to accommodate that user base in these technologies is they're leveraging, of course, baseline UX, user experience, good practice and principles, which is quite often less is more. Don't give them too much choice. But then also using things like the AI technology stack to be able to help navigate and support users. Now, there's a fear that we're bringing Clippy back from Microsoft Office in some of these technology stacks. We're certainly
Clippy.
not.
I remember Clippy.
Yeah, he had a good run for a period of time, but I like to think the new AI technology stack and the advisors and supporting agents that we're seeing getting embedded into technologies will start simplifying that. And that really stems to conversational transactions, being able to ask AI to interpret the data, navigate you around the platform, and just generally be that supporting hand for people who aren't living and breathing that technology day in, day out.
So if I'm hearing you right, one of the changes or one of the evolutions that you're seeing from a usability standpoint is AI will be actually helping to guide you while you're in there. So you're not necessarily having to go and hunt things down, but you'll be getting insights and direction and things like that through AI tools that either make it easier for you to find stuff or point you in the right direction. Is that am I hearing that right, Al?
Very right. And that's supported by good UX decisions in driving persona views so that the right people see the right thing at the right time. And that's about understanding who you're actually targeting, who's using the applications and the data sets, and then combining that with the AI piece. Absolutely.
Got it. Are you seeing that now? Is that starting to happen in platforms now, or is that one that we're a little bit away from?
So I think that's evolving. I think it's very much in its infancy. I think the market is demanding across our broader spaces the ability to target personas in the right way, to give them the information they care about. And that stemmed from obviously the last 5-10 years, people asking for executive level reporting, board level reporting that's coherent and meaningful. And that's now transitioning to how can I get my data in the hands of InfoSec, privacy, legal, compliance, procurement, whoever it may be, as we start connecting systems and sharing data between everybody. So I'd say it's still got a good 18 months to 24 months until you'll see it fully fledged and where people want it to be.
Got it. That seems to be the window that I'm hearing all three of you say is that year and a half to 2 years here. You'll see that next jump of a real AI integration. Simon, what are your thoughts? What are you seeing around user experience kind of on the contract management side?
Well, I similar actually. I mean, I think one thing we have to remember is ease of use is in the eye of the beholder, right? I always, whenever someone says, "Oh, we've made it easier to use," my heart stops, and I think I remember when I could call United and I could press buttons to get to where I need it. And now I have to talk to it, but it's too sensitive. So here's the guy standing behind me, and I end up just yelling at my phone like a crazy person in the middle of SFO, right? In theory, voice is easier, but not necessarily. And so I think you're exactly right, Alastair, that where there's some really solid low hanging fruit right now is in that natural language search. It's the stuff that we're all experimenting with on Google or Bing. Apparently, people use Bing, where you could ask a question into Google and it writes you an answer. And sometimes the answers are terrible. But once you get into a closed system, we've seen some good success with giving non sort of contracting professionals access through Teams to both the ability to ask, as it were, to ask the repository to find a document, and then to ask the document about itself. And what that means is they don't need to know the terms. They don't need to know the logic of how we store things. They don't need to know the difference between a wherefore and a with not, and all of the other stuff that I don't understand inside of contracts. They can just ask sensible, normal human questions. And I think that is a really big piece of bringing a workforce that is increasingly dominated by people who think that this is a computer into a place where they can really operate. And now we're saving them time. They don't have to become experts. That's where it's going right now. How long will it take? I mean, like, I love the idea that it's 18 to 24 months, but I've been doing this long enough to know that 24 months means not this year and probably next, no, not next year, but probably less than 10, right? So I think that's the thing. Ease of use is always contextual to what else is available and what else people are using, and it's drawing that consistency. But yeah, natural language search, man, it's fantastic.
Interesting. So Nick, on yours, I also, if you could, I'll be interested because obviously more folks, and especially on the procure to pay side, you think about mobile. So you used to have to go plug your computer in, sign into your software platform. Now you go, you open a browser, you get in, but you have folks on the go that are buying things, that are paying for things. I think interoperability with mobile is really important, especially in what you guys do. So maybe in addition to your thoughts, if you could talk a little bit about what you're seeing around mobile and how that's advancing as well, that would be really cool to hear.
Yeah, and we were really early on mobile, and we've been for years trying to demo it to people, and they're like, nah, our finance team doesn't care about mobile. But now the world's kind of catching up and realizing that it's kind of back to what I was saying earlier. You have to meet people where they are is really what it's all about. And now that people are trusting phones as business tools, not just as a place to play Candy Crush, that we're meeting people on mobile, and it's not just for people out in the fields. It's if you're walking by the front door of the office when the FedEx guy shows up, cool, I can verify delivery of something quick and easy and it doesn't get lost. Or as we're all working from home more and more, you're probably going to grab your Amazon package that's got your new keyboard in it. You're not going to be sitting at your desk when you do it, right? So it's the mobile is something we were early on without even realizing that it's really meeting people where they are is what we're all about. And as I was saying earlier, the other piece of that is if your team has a tool that they're working in, if it's Asana, if it's Jira, let them keep working there. Let them go where they're used to going and use things like easy APIs or use a Boomi or use a Workato and sync that to your procurement tool. It's all about meeting your team where they are. That's our big philosophy around that for sure.
Well, I think that's what makes it ubiquitous, right? Is to be able to be in the systems that you're in every day, whether it's your phone and your email. So I don't have to go into the system. I get an email saying, hey, I have a new risk review, go review the risk review, like you do on the Prevalent side. On mobile, Simon and Al, anything else you all are seeing on your end on mobile? I mean, Simon, obviously you can approve contracts, you can do things like that, but anything going on around mobile in either one of your spaces?
I think the best thing you just said, Nick, and I couldn't agree with you more, is you got to meet people where they are. This tiny little screen is really good for some things and really just dreadful for some other things. And when you
Yeah.
pick the right pieces, you can do well. To your point, I can do a quick review and an approval. I can approve pushing it to somebody else. I can look at a simple visualization, sure. I think just getting it right so that we're not, again, I know I'm sort of beating on the same drum, but like, let's not do tech for tech's sake. We don't want to be on mobile just because we happen to have mobile. Find the right pieces is the key.
And from my perspective, I absolutely support that, which is, and I think that ties to some of the integration concepts and the simplification of trying to get a full end-to-end life cycle is getting it into the hands of the people with the least resistance. But something we're finding quite interesting, at least on the risk side of things, and I know some of us on the call come from an audit background, myself included, which is quite often when you're doing an audit, you might be stuck somewhere inspecting something physically, in which case you need to be able to make notes and address and check control deficiencies at that point in time. So we interestingly started to see a meaningful subset of our user base actually using our risk management piece while they're doing on-site audits. So we had a natural need to start porting and supporting more tablets rather than cell phones. Doing an audit on a cell phone might be a bit challenging, certainly for me. But certainly having things tabletized appropriately so we could present the right information for them to be able to action their work easily was a nice evolution for us over the last 18 months or so.
Yeah, I think tablets for a variety of reasons. We have a client that they're a conference management company, so they manage think about some of the big trade shows and conferences, Amazon, Salesforce, their big events, things like that. So as you can imagine, over a period of days, they're on the floor, they're buying stuff. They have to get a new couch to stick over there. They've got to get a banner to put over here. So the ability to actually do work on your portable devices is really critical for them, not for others who are sitting in offices and can have access to their laptops or desktops. So I think that the user experience part of it is who your market is, who you're trying to sell to, and figuring out their needs around mobile, whether it be tablets or phones or what have you, because folks are on the go. And being at an airport over the weekend, I can tell you everybody's flying again. So there's just a lot more folks that have access to those devices. They're trying to do business on it. Cool.
Well, and I think,
Yeah,
oh,
go ahead. Sorry,
I was just
Simon.
going to say, I just think you make a really good point, and it really comes back together about meeting people where they are. Because I remember building one of those systems 15 years ago. Do you remember you used to be able to buy laptops where you'd fold them right over the top and they'd become a thing? And we were building exactly those systems you're talking about, but it wasn't quite there yet. And that's why now, as we have these much smoother systems, much better 5G networking, and we've really thought about what is the right system or the right action to do. These are finally coming in, and that's also why when we say 18 to 24 months, it might be 18 to 24 months, or it might be rather a lot longer after they stop making the convertible laptops.
Yeah, yeah, really interesting. I mean, everything's just going so fast now. It's kind of the train's moving and you're trying to get stuff in the train doors while it's going 250 miles an hour down the line. I'm just looking at the time here. So if I have one more question, if I have time for that, I'm going to try to get to that. But before I do that, I'd kind of like to close things out with each one of you, kind of our speed round. So for folks that are listening, that are maybe looking at a platform similar to yours. Maybe they're looking at an all-in platform. Maybe they have something and they're just looking to try to find a way to make it better. For those folks that are eager to kind of enhance their technology effectiveness sooner than later, what piece of advice would you give them on where they should be spending their energy that would make the biggest impact for actually getting some results that's not 12 months, 18 months, 24 months down the line? What are things they could be doing right now?
I'd certainly say from my perspective, the biggest thing when we're dealing with vendors is having a good, accurate vendor inventory. certainly from my side of things and the Prevalent side of things, and as much as in our space, if you don't have a meaningful inventory, it's going to be very difficult to be effective and meaningful against that inventory. So working with the teams up front, dealing with procurement, of course, and understanding what that looks like, what the vendor landscape looks like, is second to none, really, for every process that follows downstream.
That is fantastic. That is so non-tech, but tied to tech advice. I mean, that is such a great point. The majority of organizations have no clue. They don't have a supplier master file. They have no idea who all the suppliers are that they're working with, much less what they're buying from them, what the risk profile looks like, and where their contracts are. So it's that getting that master file to actually have visibility into who you're working with and figuring out where the source of truth is for that data. That's great advice, because everything kind of spurs from there as well. Nick, how about you?
I'm gonna probably steal Simon's answer a little bit, but contracts aren't scary.
Sorry, Simon.
This is a piece people have been talking about for years, is we need to understand our contracts, need to control our contracts, and now we're getting to a place of automating it and making it not a time suck, making it easier to understand. Yeah, contracts aren't scary.
Hey, where are my contracts? So who are my suppliers and where are my contracts? That's what I'm hearing so far. Simon, your thoughts? Oh, I think he's frozen. Is he frozen for you all too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Indeed.
Awesome. Well, if he comes back, I'll let him give us his feedback. But how non-tech are those two pieces of advice, right? So where to start is with the data. And I think those are great recommendations. It's who are we working with? What are we buying from them? What contractual obligations do I have with them? And then from there, you can start figuring out, all right, now how do I start to leverage the technology to get the data in there in the right way, to build the right KPIs, KRIs, figure out where I spend my energy to think about things like consolidation, supplier rationalization, to think about things like risk, what's our risk profile look like as an entity, and how do I start bringing risk down across our portfolio of vendors. So it is technology, but it's really a lot around the data. And we talked a lot about data today and how important that is. So that seems to be, I would say, if you had to bubble the top theme from this conversation up, it's around the data, and it's going to be more around the data as things start to advance, and especially as AI becomes more integrated. So listen, so we're just on the back end. Steve, I apologize, I didn't get to your question, but I'm going to close this out here. Al, thank you. Nick, thank you. Simon, thank you for joining us as well. Appreciate it. Great conversation. Appreciate that. We might run this back maybe later in the year or early next year to see what's happened with tech, and if we're still 18 months away or closer. We'll see. So Paul, let me turn it back over to you to close us out.
Thank you, Tom. No, that was such a great discussion, and it was so practical and great insight. So thank you, Alastair and Nick, and also Simon. And thanks to all the people who attended, because really what's inspired this great discussion. And we were thinking a lot about what was important to you, and that's why we brought these great panelists together. So keep an eye out for a recording in the next couple of days. You'll get an email with the video that you can rewatch and share with colleagues. And then for the questions that we weren't able to respond to, we'll get a direct response out to you as well in the next couple of days. And then lastly, we do have another webinar coming up on Tuesday, April 23rd, featuring two top data intelligence executives. And they're going to share insights around third-party risk management strategies to strengthen operational resilience. So we really do hope you'll be on the lookout for via email and on LinkedIn as we have registration for that coming up. So everyone have a great day today. Thank you again, panelists, and we'll see you next month.
Awesome.
Thanks for having us.
Everyone. Bye-bye.